right. Well, hello. Welcome to another episode of Get Your Head in the Game podcast. I am Dr. Jenna Ross, and we talk all things mindset, mental health, and sports related as it pertains to the game of life. And I am super excited today. I have a very special guest, Shauna, my friend Shauna. She has recently become a helicopter pilot. And I know that that does not fit the realm of sports, but I did have to invite her on because of the journey that she went through and the resiliency and the mindset that she had to have to be able to do this is quite impressive. And so we want to hear from you, Shauna, on your journey and tips for success of going through something as challenging as becoming a helicopter pilot and being successful. And so super excited and thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Love that you asked me to join you. So excited to share
Yes,
whatever I can from the journey.
yes, for sure. So, okay, so I would love to know how how did it start? Was it one day you woke up and just this is what I was going to do? Like share on that for a minute.
Yeah, so like you said, it's maybe not in the sport realm, but it's unique. Not everybody is a helicopter pilot or aviation in general. And it definitely wasn't something that I grew up. It wasn't a lifelong goal. I didn't know anyone in aviation. It really kind of happened by chance. I took a helicopter tour when on vacation once, and that was the first time I was ever in a helicopter. And we had a female pilot, and I remember everybody was kind of oohing and eyeing, looking outside of the helicopter at all the views, and I was, but the whole time I was watching her. And even then, I didn't think anything of it. But then years and years later, when I was starting to think about, what would I like to do for fun? I thought it would be cool to say I took a helicopter lesson once. So it kind of started out as this interest just to do something fun. I like outgoing activities, unique activities. And then through that process, it just kind of evolved as I started to learn about the industry, the opportunities, and the conversations that I was having with people and how I got connected with them is really what eventually opened up those doors. So it was pretty sudden for me,
Mhm.
but it did evolve over time and through conversations.
Wow. So watching this female pilot, how long ago was that?
That was like 7 years ago. And, when the pandemic hit and everybody kind of had this extra time, it was in 2020. It wasn't until 2020 that I started to even look into doing something for fun. So a lot of years later. But I didn't start training until really the end of 2020. No, sorry, 2021. So there was a big gap there. And within that gap, it really wasn't on my mind. It was, like I said, years later when I started to think about what I might like to do for fun.
Wow. So it started as something you want to do for fun
Yeah.
and now progressed into this is what I'm doing for my career in my future.
Yeah. Yeah, a big turn. Scary change. The transition was crazy. It wasn't expected. And as I started to get intrigued, and like I said, as I started to learn more about opportunities and the how, um, it was pretty surprising. And I had a lot of hesitance as whether or not it was something I was going to actually go for, and a lot of questioning of myself, like, really, am I going to do this? Like, is this really what I'm going to try and do? It seemed so off the wall even for myself, that even then starting those conversations where I was telling my friends and telling other people, like, it, no one saw it coming, but I don't regret it in any way. I love it. I'm really glad that I decided to do it, and it's been tough, but it's been rewarding too.
Yeah, wow. So now that you're through on the other side, what was the training like?
Training is really intense. It's funny. Everyone kept telling me when I began how difficult it was, that just to really prepare myself, that it was a long haul and there were going to be ups and downs, and a lot of these cautions. They were very encouraging, but a lot of caution too, of expectation as to the journey. And thankfully I knew enough back then to know that I wasn't grasping fully what they were trying to tell me or understanding it all, but that I would. And so the training, it's, it was hard to know what to expect because I didn't know anybody in the field, but there's a lot more to it than just learning how to fly a helicopter, which obviously that's what we do. But there's so much on the backside. There's so much groundwork that we do, so much memorization and tools that you need of knowledge that have to do with physical things, mental things, regulations, studying airspace, having to know your instruments. I've joked with friends that I feel like in some ways I needed to become a mechanic. You have to know how things work together and what's showing up, inside in the cockpit and how they're feeding off of each other. And it's not just making sure everything's working, but how you interpret it. So a lot of flight training, but a lot of ground training. And it was far more than what I ever could have even anticipated it would be. I mean, we did go into mental aspects, we did go into physical aspects, because how you are and who you are and what's going on in your head and what's going on as you're flying will affect your flying. So it was intense. I know that's kind of a very broad thing to say. It's hard without getting into all the finer details, but it was a lot.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So what did they, I guess when you first started, the process to become qualified for this, what did they screen you for, and kind of what, were they looking at that mental capacity of you to, because it's not just like you're training, like
Yeah,
yes, you are training, but as soon as you are trained and you get up in that air, it's life or death, right? Like you have to be competent. So what
it
types of
is
things were they
sometimes.
screening you for and looking for?
Well, one of the very first things I did, which I didn't know existed, is we actually have medical examiners that are just for those in aviation, that are just for pilots. They're called AMEs, aeromedical examiners. And you do have to go first for a screening, psychological and physical, before you get a medical certificate, which is required so you can even begin training, so
Wow.
you can even go up in the air. It's not necessarily the most intense thing where you're just drilled and asked about all your history or childhood history and who you are and why you think the way that you think, but they need to make sure that mentally you're competent and that you're in a safe space before you start going up. There's other requirements, other things that they had to go through with us on the ground first about safety in general around the helicopter and what to expect. A lot of setting of expectations before we ever went up. It's called awareness training. So again, you are prepared and understanding that this is a big deal. It's not safe. There's a lot of accountability to your own mentalities and why you're doing it. If you just want to go up there and fly around and, be crazy and push the limits of your helicopter, like you're endangering yourself. So, a lot of, like I said, expectation first. And then as you kind of go along through the process, a lot of checking in.
Mm.
A lot of self-awareness is needed to go through a process like this.
Wow. So as you're going through it, what did you, I mean, what was your mindset like? What did you learn about yourself? Because that's a lot of
Uh-huh.
pressure to be on you and to be in a learning environment. Like I
Yeah.
talk about sports and that's pressure. I think that's pressure to perform, but
Yes.
it's not necessarily, yes, you are learning, but not really actively. Like you were in an active learning environment with pressure on you. So
Yeah.
how did that affect you?
Well, it was the first time that I ever dealt with as much pressure as this type of training will put on a person. And kind of going back to what I mentioned before, is they gave me a lot of heads up to take it a day at a time, that if there was ever a time where I needed to step away, that was okay, that that's kind of normal. And I would say encourage as you kind of go through this process. It required a lot of self-awareness. The amount of pressure was more than anything that I had ever dealt with. And so when pressure is applied, whatever is in us is going to come to the surface. How we do or do not deal well with stress, how it affects us mentally, but how it affects us physically. In training, it was the first time that I ever dealt with mental fatigue. I've been physically fatigued before, and even in training, we talk about the different types, chronic or acute, but mentally, I was beginning to experience mental fatigue to where you get mentally worn out from having so many variables that you are concentrating on at every single moment that you're in the air, balancing all these variables that there was a point where, like, I remember one day specifically, I came out of a test and it was 4 hours long and it was just straight. We started early in the morning and we just really got to it. And he kept checking in and asking me if I wanted to stop or take a break. And I kept thinking, no, we're almost done. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And I came out of that and it was a ground test of all my ground knowledge, asking me all these questions about everything that I had learned up to that point. I was getting ready for my final test with the FAA. And I remember I came out and my trainer saw me and he's like, hey, are you okay? I was mentally and physically having a hard time saying anything, forming a sentence. And I remember after that, I went home and I was telling my parents about it. I met them later for dinner. And I remember telling my dad, I was like, if you sat me down for 4 hours and asked me questions about my own life for 4 hours, like I would run out of things to say. Like, my hair is brown, my eyes are brown, like for 4 hours. And it was all these questions about flying, like I said, those regulations, all these things. So
Wow.
I really kind of went through the grinder. And as I went through it and started realizing, okay, this is way more than I thought it was going to be, it required me to face myself a lot and how that pressure was making me feel. It challenged a lot of mindsets that I had about myself and whether or not I could do it, or if I was so discouraged and frustrated with a disappointment, why? What expectation did I have? What expectation was I putting on myself? I had a lot of failures. I had pretty intense moments of even having to process like shame and embarrassment from having those failures, from having these expectations that I put on myself and how I believed it should have gone. And thankfully, I had those people from my school that came alongside me and had a good support system in my life of other people who were also providing feedback and kind of talking to me in what they were seeing, helping me to identify things and helping me to challenge myself, and who was I going to be through that process and how was I going to move forward from those failures or whatever it is. So I feel like I just rambled on a lot, but it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through for sure.
Wow. Yeah, because you're not only, I mean, I see when you're talking, it's like several layers of things of trying
It
to learn a
is.
new skill, and
Yeah.
that skill brings up things within you. And so for you, having those people alongside you to kind of direct you in those moments where that you were questioning, what else helped you through that? Was it just a total shift in your mindset? Was there things that like you did to actively help yourself through that those changes?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. I think when I started realizing how tough it was and how much I was struggling at certain points, it was very eye-opening. At times, at first, overwhelming, because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel comfortable. It was a lot of confrontation in my life. And so I really had to make those decisions as to who I was going to be. So it caused me to really focus in on self-reflection and
Mm,
self-awareness, to identify what was coming up, and then really doing as much as I could on my own first, and then taking those pieces to those people around me that I trusted, who weren't just going to sugarcoat or who weren't just going to blow me up and like, oh no, but you're awesome, you're good. Like, actually,
mm,
I'm struggling. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm identifying and what I see, but what do you see? I needed a lot of help through those hard moments. And it wasn't just a pep talk. Like I said, there were so many variables of stress, things that were happening within school and just training alone. And then life always is always happening, regardless of what we're going through, right?
Mhm.
regardless if we're, struggling within our sport or our profession, like life is still happening outside of the walls of that
Yes.
sport or the training or the physical buildings we visit each day.
Mhm.
So a lot of shifts in mentality for
Mhm.
sure. Choosing who I was going to be and accepting the things that was coming up, so that I could make the shift. Okay, so if this is what's been happening and this is why it's been happening, what do I need to pivot? What do I need to address within myself so that I can move forward?
Okay, yeah. So coming back to what you just said there, choosing who you want to be.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it forced you to then make those choices?
Yeah. I truly did not have a choice.
Mhm.
Was I going to let the circumstance envelop me, overcome me? Was I going to have a crappy attitude about it or stomp my feet or blame shift, when things didn't go the way that I had hoped or the way that I wanted? Or was I going to take that personal responsibility? Was I going to give myself any accountability? And was I even going to allow anybody else to bring accountability into my life? Like those were all these things that I had to kind of ask myself and reflect on. So for sure, yeah, it was a little bit of everything, but it was an opportunity, I guess, is the biggest thing that I wanted to keep in the forefront of my mind, and something
Mhm.
that I had to make an active effort to continue to say to myself, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity.
Mhm.
This is an opportunity. Like I
Mhm.
get to even address these things in myself because of how hard this is, because of how unique it is. Because if I didn't have that extra pressure and I didn't go through this journey, I guarantee you, I know without a shadow of a doubt, I wouldn't have had all those opportunities to even know truly what was in me at that intense level, because I didn't
Mhm.
have any other pressures in my life that were challenging me in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about when pressure is applied, you find out what you're really made of.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds like you found out what you were made of and you were forced to face those hard things about yourself using that self-reflection and self-awareness. And I think so
Yeah.
many times we steer away from that because of
Yep.
what it means, like you said, accountability, that if I face those things, then that means I have to make changes. And that's a scary thing for people to make those changes. But for you in your situation, not having a choice. It was either I change and succeed,
Yeah.
or I let it overcome me and I keep, I go backwards, right? So I love that you bring that into the picture of things of going through tough things to hold yourself accountable for those things and
Yeah.
not be hesitant to use self-reflection and self-awareness as a
Yeah.
tool to help you to get that right mindset, right? And you really, I mean, just being challenged at that level, like there's already got to be I would imagine, a certain level of mental toughness, a certain level of commitment to it. Like,
Yeah.
in your brain, you were committed and you weren't going to walk away just because it got
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes we forget that commitment level really can help keep you going in those moments.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there were times where I experienced, like, so I failed a test more than once. But one
yes.
specific time, I didn't have any retest on the horizon at that time, and it's something that I've kind of shared with you a little bit about before, but so there was no motivation to get back to the books or to try again because that didn't exist. There was no opportunity at that time to try again. But I remember feeling so overwhelmed that it happened and so frustrated as to the reasons why it happened, the lack of knowledge in certain areas that I had that it even, like I said, it even happened. And I was feeling sorry for myself a little bit, pretty discouraged. And even the thought of opening my books again, like, was a disgusting thought. It was like a heavy, just nasty, like,
Mm.
there's no way in heck, man. Like, oh, like, I am not thinking about anything aviation. I'm not doing it. Like, and my instructors even told me, like, hey, just don't think about anything. Go home, take the day, breathe, reset, all this stuff.
Mhm.
Well, it was the next morning. So that happened on a Thursday. It was the next morning on a Friday that I got up. I took my dog out for a walk, and I just still had that really disgusting feeling from this failure that had happened. And it was a pretty pivotal moment for me and something that I'll remember for the rest of my life because, like I said, there was no motivation to go back because nothing existed moving forward. And yet I was like, you know what? Like, even though I failed for these certain reasons and this is what happened and this is where I lacked, like, I refuse to let that define me. And so I was like, I'm going to go home because I never want to experience this ever again. I'm going to go home and I'm going to study those areas. And even if I didn't know it then, I will know it now. And I just made that determination to face what literally was quite, I said literally already, literally making me feel
Mhm.
gross and face it again.
Mhm.
And I went back and I studied all those things, not
Wow.
just because, and it was not fun. And I knew like, and it sucked. Every aspect about it sucked because I did the thing I actually did not want to do in any way, shape, or form for like, and it was that feeling of like, I'm not doing this again, but I did it. And the crazy thing was that that paid off. I had no idea how things were going to transpire, but I ended up having an opportunity for a retest a few days later after the weekend. And what was so crazy about this, and I know we won't have the time to go into it, but there was a timeline on everything because I had a pretty major physical injury last year that was chronic, and I was getting ready for reconstructive surgery on my ankle. So when I didn't make it in time for that test and I had that failure, we were done. We were out of time. I wasn't going to even have the time. There was no way we could try and set something up or plan it again for a retest before my surgery. So the failure was big. Not that I didn't graduate, but knowing then like I was going to have all these months off because I wasn't going to be able to walk or fly or do anything. But I still went back and I went back into those books. So um everything turned around and it turned out for good, thankfully. And it's pretty insane and it's hard to put it into words because there's so many facets to even that one story.
Yeah.
But I think when we make those determinations about who we're going to be, regardless if we have motivation because we know it might help us or it'll probably help us, like a lot of times we have motivation because there's something driving it, right? There's a purpose behind it.
Yes.
Well, I'm studying because I have a test. I'm doing this because of that, you know? I didn't have that. So I think having those core values and core beliefs about who we are and why we do what we do and how we're going to face failure, how we're going to face confronting ourselves is so vital to any type of success because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity. Like we can't know everything in the
Mhm.
future, right? But when we have those types of disciplines and determinations about ourselves, despite how we feel emotionally, because our emotions lie to us all the time,
Mhm.
but we just have that mental toughness to say, you know, even if I gain quote unquote nothing from this, this is who I am. And because this is
Mhm.
who I am, this is how I'm gonna handle and process it. This is what I'm choosing to do as a reflection of me, not as a reflection of what I can get out of it. You are gonna get so much out of that later in life at some point, just being that person, and the way that you kind of navigate and walk through everything that you go through, it will pay off. It absolutely will pay off. Um, and it's pretty crazy and mind-blowing to see
Yeah.
how it does pay off eventually. But like I said, I will never forget that for the rest of my life because that was one of the best times I've ever done in facing myself after a failure, not having a reason why I would even go back and address it kind of at that time. Um,
Wow.
and I'm so thankful I did. And now it's kind of a personal testimony a bit, and I can encourage other people in it as well. And so that's cool. And I look forward to doing that more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Wow.
So
No,
just,
that's incredible. Like talk about, deciding who you're going to be and let that become part of you and not giving up.
yeah.
We are so sometimes so quick to give up and say, well, it's just not meant to be, right? Like you had that choice in that moment to say, well, I guess that's not meant to be. Yet you decided against it. No, I'm doing this. So I love that you're reminding people of that. telling them, like you get to decide that. You get to determine your own values and what you're going to do in those tough moments.
Yeah.
And to know ahead of time, I think is the key too, is because going into something, it's kind of like, do I let the circumstance kind of dictate who I'm going to be? Or
Yeah.
do I determine before I even head into it who I'm going to be? Like, this is who I am, right? I'm not going to fluctuate if I fail and then quit. No, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to give up no matter what. And the timeline may have to change, but I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that you share that. So now moving forward for you, you said you get to share this. So kind of what's on the horizon for you moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm going back to school hopefully soon in the next couple of weeks. I did have my surgery, and I'm in physical therapy, and we're trying to get me back to a healthy place where I can go back to training. But I'm going to actually go back and get my instructor's rating. So I hope the plan, and I will, not hope, but I will, I'll get there. But I'm going to go through my instructor's rating so I can actually start teaching other people. In aviation, that's a common path because when you graduate and you're just starting out, you don't have the high accumulation of hours and experience that you're going to need to go for the bigger jobs, I guess, for the bigger
Mhm.
corporations. So a lot of people build hours through training. But I really do look forward to it because I've kind of, as best as I can, I've documented a bit of my journey. I try and keep in mind how things felt for me, the
Mhm.
good and the bad, positive, negatives, and what it took, and to kind of bring in this understanding, but also a bit of compassion and empathy to know what it's like for students to go through this process. And I'll get to encourage them in a way, having just walked through it myself, but also in having walked through it, but dealing with pretty major life circumstances on top of it as well. So that's what's next for me. Yeah, I'm getting ready to start all of that. I'm already studying a bit at home to amp up, for where I'm going to need to be just to get back into it all. But I do look forward to it. It's going to be hard,
Wow.
but
Yeah. That's
I
so
look forward to
incredible.
it.
And I'm like excited for you because you're going to be able to make that impact on, future people coming in. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say if you had any piece of advice for somebody that was looking into this? Maybe they're like, this is what I want to do, and they haven't yet taken the steps, or maybe somebody who's in the process themselves. Or even somebody starting out, maybe it's not even along the lines of being a pilot, but somebody that
Yeah.
wants to pursue a challenging task. What would you tell them?
Yeah. So I feel like the thing that we hear a lot is like hard work, determination, perseverance. I think those have to kind of be a just a given. Like, there's a lot more that I would put on top of that. Like that has to be part of your basic DNA, right?
Mhm.
That you have to determine that about yourself. On top of that, I would challenge people to learn how to become self-aware, learn how to extend grace to yourself when those negative things that you are not proud of comes up. Having a support system is super important. Welcoming accountability into your life, not just accountability for your actions, whether or not you show up on time, but accountability to your attitude, to where you are mentally is super important. Gosh, what else would I say? I feel like I maybe wrote down a couple things. Just self-evaluation, like I said. I don't know, just a willingness to let go of control and
Mhm.
to accept that there's going to be variables that are going to pop up that you didn't plan for,
Mhm.
and to start asking yourselves those hard questions now as to, okay, how will I respond, how do I want to respond, and just that willingness, I think, to be open to welcome whatever that journey and that process may bring, good and bad, or positive or frustrating,
Mhm.
because I can't even say that all the junk that came up in my own life, in my own mentalities, and like I don't even want to say that that's negative. In the moment, yeah, I had some negative things, right? Like pretty crappy attitudes, definitely frustrated. that's part of just being a human. That doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, but it wasn't negative in the sense that, like, I am still that person. Like I said, it was an opportunity. So are you going to have that perspective to say, okay, even if crap hits the fan, or your perspective is that everyone's looking at you a certain negative way, or whatever it may be, whatever it is, that you make the determination now, I'm going to allow it to be an opportunity in my life. And I will face it. I'm going to be courageous enough to be brave enough to keep myself accountable and to address whatever's popping up, and it's going to be an opportunity. And just like making those determinations now, because yes, you're going to have hard work, absolutely. You're going to have to persevere, absolutely. But if you aren't willing to change along the way, you're going to cap yourself. How far you can go is going to be limited. And nobody wants that. I mean, if we're being honest, we don't want to start out on a journey to know we can only go so far. We want to go as far as possible. Well, that's going to require change. At least I think so.
Oh, absolutely. The growth in the process. And I love that you say your mindset has to see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And even the failures as opportunities, the frustrations as opportunities, and the whole process of it, good and bad, is all an opportunity. So I love that you say that. I think this is gonna be great for you as an instructor to be able to give this information to new incoming, students, because it is, anytime you walk through something challenging, you learn so much about yourself. And, to be able to share that with other people because they're going to be walking through it themselves that's going to be very powerful. So,
I hope so. I look forward to it. I mean, at least we can't ever fully understand how somebody else is feeling, because even if our situation was tough, it's not the same type of tough for them. We all have different variables, right? But at least there's that understanding of being able to identify with that overwhelming part of it, or the stress part of it. So I do look forward to bringing in that level of support, in different ways or unique ways. I don't know. We'll see what it brings, but I'm definitely going to try and do my best.
yeah. So if anybody was wanting to find you or to follow you, we've talked about this. You're a big TikTok person. I'm not so much on TikTok. Where could somebody find you or reach out to you if they had further questions and wanted to talk to you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. I just haven't used it as much, but both Instagram and TikTok, you can find me by searching for Heli Pilot Shauna. It's the same name, both places. But yeah, please follow along, and
Yeah.
anybody who's hoping to do something like this, best of luck to them. It's tough.
Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing everything today. It was really
Yeah.
good. Definitely some nuggets of wisdom in there for somebody to take away and hopefully apply to their own life.
Yeah.
But yeah, look forward to watching your journey even more.